Well, this is finally back. It's only been 6 months. Oh, well, last time on Weapon Balance Ideas, I did the heavy. In May. Then I figured, why not wait until the summer update is out and then continue from there? And we all know how that turned out. Either way, we're back with Engineer, in a series where I talk about some balance ideas for weapons, in case you forgot. And feel free to write down any of your own ideas, presumably for Engineer, because that's what the topic is of this video. But if you go over Engineer's arsenal, he doesn't really have much in the way of bad weapons. At least not any that you would look at and say, that weapon is so bad, it's almost never worth equipping. And for the class with the second least amount of weapons, that's not that bad. Obviously, some of Engineer's unlocks are more useful than others, but still, it's not overall that bad. So this one may come across as a little more nitpicky than some of the other classes. Or maybe it won't. Who knows? Let's start. In the Meteor Match update, the Widowmaker was given a 10% damage bonus against your sentry's target. This basically had no impact on how good the weapon is. I mean, it's a fine weapon. You could completely remove that stat, it would still be good. But since it's there, we can at least make it more noticeable. That 10% increase is 9 more damage at most. And that's if you land every single pellet. Increase that to plus 20% more damage and you get up to 18 more damage per shot. That way it's a little bit more useful. Pair that with a mini sentry or a level 1 and you can do some pretty good damage with your shotgun. Or you could just remove the stat, or leave it how it is. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. The Pomson is an interesting one. It could have just been a Righteous Bison primary for Engineer and everyone probably would have been happy with that. But they just had to have the drain mechanic. And since when the weapon came out, the drains were super annoying to deal with, they ended up balancing the weapon around them instead of changing it entirely. This overall has made the weapon just kinda okay. What if I had a way to make the weapon better overall, not just a complete copy of the Bison, and keep the Uber and Cloak drain? Impossible, you say? Maybe not. You could bring back the projectile penetration and make its damage identical to the Righteous Bison's. Then remove the up to 10% Uber drain and up to 20% Cloak drain from the regular shots, and then, like the Cow Mangler, add a charge shot. One that requires and uses up all 4 of the Pomson shots. And also like the Mangler, it will take 2 seconds to actually fire and slow you down to 33% move speed while you're charging. This charge shot will mini crit and drain up to 10% medigun charge or up to 20% cloak of the first player hit. So pretty much any enemy that you hit will take mini crit damage, but only the first one, if it's a medic or spy, will get the secondary effect. And like the current version, the drain amount will still fall off over distance. Maybe you can increase the max distance a little more, but yeah, I don't know. And also this charge shot will be visually distinct from the regular one. If they want to be lazy, they could just recolor the regular shot orange or yellow depending on the team. That would probably be fine. But yeah, even though the charge shot will be fairly situational, the Pomson still becomes better overall, and it gets a neato charge shot gimmick as an extra thing. The new panic attack is, I guess it's better than the old one. It still doesn't seem like its stats really work well together. I'm guessing the point is to be able to take it out quickly and then kill your target in, ideally, 1 shot. Because really, the quick switch seems to be the main selling point here. If you manage to land every single pellet at close range, the panic attack will do 96 damage. Which, sure, that sounds good, but that's only 6 more than the shotgun's max. And if you hold down the fire button on the panic attack, each shot will get less accurate and probably do less damage. Besides completely reworking the weapon again, I guess you could lower the damage penalty from minus 30% to minus 20%, and that would increase the max damage from 96 to 108. So again, this weapon becomes more of like an emergency backup weapon that you take out quickly and try to kill your target in 1 or 2 shots. But now it would actually be good at that, or better at least. I've basically always thought that the resistance on the Wrangler was too high. I mean, a level 3 sentry can just soak up damage. Of course, that's on top of the double firing rate it also gets. But the nerf it got in Gunmetal reduced your repair rate to Wrangled sentries by the same amount that it resists, so 66%, which I think was a pretty clever change. That way a single engineer couldn't just stall out Ubers by repairing his Wrangled sentry, or at least not as well. However, the Wrangler is still banned in the most common competitive format of 6v6, where there are going to be less sources of damage output because there's only going to be 6 players on each team. Obviously, that's 6, so it's called 6v6. Maybe reducing both a shield and repair penalty from 66% to 50% would make the Wrangler a little easier to deal with fewer players. It would resist less, but it would also allow Engineer to heal his shielded sentry a little bit faster too, so it's not all bad. And you could argue how much of a role competitive should have when it comes to balancing, but I generally think that there could be a balance when it comes to banned weapons. I think you can make them work, for the most part, in both casual and competitive. At least that should be the goal with most weapons. I mean, they don't all have to be competitively viable, but as long as they're not banned, it should be fine. And I don't think anyone could actually say that the Wrangler would be somehow bad if it only resisted by 50%. Even on a team of 12, it can be pretty difficult to get to a sentry nest when the sentry has 635 health, while pyros are also air blasting you back, and your other teammates refuse to help you, and now there are 2 wrangled sentries? Bottom line, the Wrangler might be overall worse this way, but it would still be very good. And speaking of weapon bans, the short circuit is banned in every competitive format, as far as I know. Though casually, this weapon seems sorta underused, and I'm not really that sure why. It saved me from stickies plenty of times, but this one has kinda stumped me for a while. Without making the weapon just bad like the original version, can you make a projectile deleting weapon work? There's gotta be some way. But this is the best I got. Increase the time taken to fire your alt fire from half a second to 0.75 seconds. That would put it on the same interval as air blasts, overall weakening its projectile destroying ability. But then, you know what? The only use that the primary fire on the short circuit has is for damage. So you could make the damage better. It's not very good to begin with. Increase the base damage of your primary fire from 10 to 15, upping the damage from a max of 70 per second to 105. But obviously this is still on a very short range. And then also if you want, you could increase the secondary fire damage from 20 to 30. It's not really going to be used for damage, but still. So your alt fire is now on the same refire delay that Air Blast has, but you could also run around and zap things more effectively. Cool! The Southern Hospitality is kind of a bland weapon, and it's probably not one you see equipped super often because generally the other non-stock wrenches have more interesting stats. Though in a scenario where random crits never existed or were just turned off, the Southern Hospitality might as well just be a straight upgrade over stock. Your level 3 Sentry will probably do a pretty good job of keeping pyros away, and even if you do get caught by a pyro when you're wandering around, that 20% vulnerability probably won't make such a huge difference. You'll probably die either way. It's such a middle-of-the-road weapon that if you're gonna change it, you can pretty much go in any direction. Not that it necessarily needs to be changed. I mean, it's not bad, and it's not overpowered, it's just... it's boring! It's a boring weapon! So this idea I had was actually for a new weapon that kind of tied your health with your buildings. And then I toned it down a whole lot and said, maybe it'll work on the Southern Hospitality. Alright, so what if you added a new upside? Something like plus 30% health from healers on wearer. Meaning medics, payload carts, and most importantly dispensers will all heal 30% faster. Then replace the fire damage penalty with the downside that you lose 20 health when one of your buildings is destroyed. Basically, the point behind this idea is that once you're set up, you're going to be harder to kill because of the faster heal rate, but if your dispenser or sentry go down, you're going to take an extra chunk of damage just for letting one of your buildings get destroyed, making it more likely that you're going to die before you're allowed to step back up. So if you have a level 3 dispenser up, it's going to be harder for enemies to kill you through explosive splash damage because that dispenser heals you up quicker. But if they take out that dispenser, not only do you lose your heal bonus, but you're also damaged for letting that happen. It also makes that bleed slightly more useful for spies than it already is because you really don't want your stuff getting sapped, because if it does, that's going to damage you when it's destroyed. It still doesn't differ from stock massively, but at least it's slightly more interesting this way. I'm not really sure how good this idea is. I've changed it like 3 times leading up to this video. I do think that the Southern Hospitality could use something more and maybe be given a proper downside, but like I said, it's such a bland weapon that you can kind of go any direction with it. So I'm interested to see what ideas people might have for the Southern Hospitality. No one ever talks about it! And since the Jungle Inferno update brought some changes to classes I already covered, I figure why not go back and take another look at some of the weapons that got changed. Not counting for Medic, Sniper, and Spy because I haven't even gotten to them yet. And there's also a few that I want a little more time to play around with, like the Sandman, the Gloves Are Running Urgently, and Pyro's new weapons. Give them a little more time. So for the Scout, the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol has gone full circle. From being really good, to bad, to really good again. I'm not super sure why anyone would use the stock pistol over the pocket pistol now. For that 3 extra shots, is it worth it? The pocket pistol heals a pretty good amount and has a higher damage output than the regular pistol. When I talked about it the first time, I suggested replacing the damage vulnerability with a 50% slower holster, but I feel like that would still work here. Except, you know, there's no vulnerability to replace. You'd still be able to whip out the pocket pistol if you need some extra health or you want to finish someone off, or both. But now you need to be a little bit more committed because of the extra time it takes to take out your primary or your melee. I don't think the Flying Guillotine is bad as a standalone weapon. It never really was. However, the combo it had with the Sandman was fun. To use, at least, not necessarily for the receiving end. So to bring that back in some way, I think it might be cool to add a 100% mini crits versus debuff target. Meaning a slowed target, a bleeding target, a burning one, or one with Mad Milk on them, whatever. will take 68 damage from the Flying Guillotine, but they won't take mini crits from the bleed, just the initial hit. And that would allow it to pair with 3 of Scout's melee weapons, the Sandman, the Boston Basher, and the Rap Assassin. It's no 150, but it's 68 damage is pretty good on a weapon that's already decent. So the blog post and the patch notes claim to have reduced the Atomizer damage penalty from minus 20% to minus 15%, but they actually somehow managed to increase it to minus 25%. I don't know how that happened, but either way, why would you remove the swing speed penalty instead of the damage penalty? The 25% damage penalty completely counteracts the mini crits while airborne gimmick it has. A mini crit from the Atomizer now would just do the same damage that the regular bat does with a regular hit. Remove the damage penalty and add back the slower swing, this time say minus 25% instead of minus 30%. Now the mini crits while airborne actually means something. I should have known this was gonna happen. They took a weapon that was very powerful on one class and mediocre on the other and made it mediocre on both. That's kinda lame. Basically, I'm just gonna say the same thing I did last time. Split the reserve shooter into 2 weapons and then try to balance it that way. Here, this is basically how I do it. Right here. Look at those stats. The base jumper change is one I know a lot of people weren't super fond of, and I'm kinda one of them. I know why it was changed, but very rarely do I like the idea of just straight nerfing a weapon without giving it any sort of compensation. Especially one like the base jumper that wasn't exactly a problem or even used all that often casually. The reduced air control didn't end up being a huge deal, but not being able to redeploy or shoot in the air is pretty lame. If you retract it while you're high up, you're going to take fall damage when before you could just redeploy the shoot 2 feet off the ground and avoid taking any damage. Which is why I'm going to say add wearer never takes fall damage, just like the original version of the pocket pistol. Not that it exactly makes any sense why a non-deployed parachute would prevent you from taking fall damage, but who cares? We don't need realism. This way it gets a pretty useful passive bonus along with a slower descent when the chute is actually open. And alright, that's engineer and post-jungle Inferno balance ideas. After 6 months of waiting, was it worth the wait? Probably not. I wouldn't be surprised if people lost interest in this series entirely. But I'll try to get the next 3 or 4 out in reasonable time. But until then, I'll do some other stuff. Since Jungle Inferno, I've basically just been wanting to actually play TF2 instead of actually making videos on it. Also Mario Odyssey. There's too many things to play. What a terrible problem to have.